Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really complex history. Palestine, particularly focusing on how its path, especially leading up to 1948, was significantly shaped, you could say, by the interests and chess moves of major world powers.
Absolutely. It's a story where global ambitions constantly intersect with local realities.
And we've got some fascinating sources that help us trace exactly how those interests played out. Our aim today is, well, to really unpack that international context. It's often understated, but you can't fully grasp the situation without it.
Exactly. Looking at Palestine through this lens of great power politics adds a vital dimension. It forces you to see how these often competing imperial agendas actively molded what happened on the ground.
Okay, so let's kick things off way back in the Ottoman era. From 1516, for about 3 centuries, Palestine was, well, basically a collection of districts within the vast Ottoman Empire. Maybe not their top priority, but you can already see early European interests starting to bubble up.
That's right. For roughly 300 years, it was relatively stable, governed under the Ottoman millet system. This gave religious groups, Jews, Christians, Muslims, quite a bit of internal autonomy.
Right, self-governance on religious matters.
But towards the end of the 18th century, things began to shift. Subtly at first. European powers, France and Russia especially, started using the protection of religious minorities. Catholics for France, Orthodox Christians for Russia, as a sort of pretext, really, for political influence.
A foothold.
Pretty much. It was an early sign of the more direct interventions that were coming down the line.
And then things really accelerate with the Egyptian invasion in the 1830s. Muhammad Ali sends his son, Ibrahim Pasha, in to occupy Palestine and Syria. This wasn't just a regional skirmish, was it? It had major international ripples.
Oh, absolutely. Muhammad Ali's move was a serious challenge to the Ottoman Sultan. And while Ibrahim Pasha did bring in some modernization efforts, it also caused a lot of unrest. But crucially, this expansion destabilized the Eastern Mediterranean. It rang alarm bells in Europe. Britain, especially, got very nervous about its route to India.
The strategic concern. So the great powers felt they couldn't just watch anymore.
Precisely. In 1840, you have Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia stepping in militarily. They forced Egypt to pull back and restored Ottoman rule, at least nominally.
But it wasn't really the same Ottoman rule, was it?
Not at all. This intervention was a huge turning point. It showed just how weak the Ottomans were becoming and massively increased European leverage. As part of the deal, the Europeans got better trade deals and insisted on more protections for minorities under the Ottoman Tanzimat reforms. It marked a real escalation of direct European meddling.
And that meddling just grew deeper as the 19th century wore on, right? We see a much more visible European presence.
Definitely. Between 1840 and 1880, European influence really intensified. Consulates popped up, especially in Jerusalem, flags flying, symbols of power, missionary schools, religious institutions backed by different European nations. They all expanded. Britain got very involved in archaeological digs, often linked to biblical narratives.
Connecting it back home.
France pushed its role as protector of Catholic sites and schools. Russia poured money, Tsar's money, into building grand Orthodox churches and places for pilgrims.
And we shouldn't forget the Germans and their Templar colonies.
No, that's a key piece too. Starting mid-century, these German Protestant settlers, the Templars, set up farming communities, Haifa being a major one. Their aim was explicitly to make the land productive, adding an economic dimension to European involvement.
Okay, so the stage is really set. European powers are deeply embedded. And now into this mix comes Zionism. Jewish immigration starts to pick up. Political Zionism emerges. How did the great powers react to this new factor?
Well, the late 19th, early 20th century sees the start of modern Jewish immigration, the first Aliyah, often driven by horrific pogroms in Russia. Then comes the second Aliyah, more politically motivated.
Right.
And alongside this, you have Theodor Herzl crystallizing political Zionism. His book, Der Judenstaat, the first Zionist Congress in 1897, the goal was clear: a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Herzl knew he needed great power backing for this.
But getting that backing wasn't straightforward, was it? He hit some roadblocks.
He absolutely did. His meeting with Kaiser Wilhelm II in Jerusalem in 1898, a big symbolic moment, but not much came of it, practically. Germany had its own complex relationship with the Ottomans, interests it didn't want to risk.
Do you want to rock the boat?
Exactly. And Herzl's offer to the Ottoman Sultan, basically, financial aid for a charter allowing Jewish settlement that got rejected too. The Sultan was wary of the political implications, giving up any kind of autonomy.
So initial attempts weren't hugely successful.
Not in terms of concrete charters, no. But it's important that some powers, especially Britain, were starting to watch the Zionist movement with, let's say, strategic interest. They could see potential future uses down the road.
And then comes the cataclysm, World War I. The Ottoman Empire joins Germany, and suddenly its territories, including Palestine, are squarely in the sights of the Allies.
World War I changed everything. With the Ottomans allied with Germany, Palestine became strategically vital for the Allies, particularly Britain. Controlling it meant protecting the Suez Canal, that critical artery to India.
And this wartime pressure led to, well, a series of promises that seem fundamentally at odds with each other.
Deeply contradictory, yes. You've got three major and conflicting commitments happening in quick succession.
Can you walk us through the Hussein McMahon correspondence first?
Sure. In 1915-16, Britain, through correspondence with Sharif Hussein of Mecca, seemed to promise support for Arab independence over a large area of Ottoman territory if the Arabs revolted against the Turks. Now, Britain later claimed Palestine was excluded, but the Arab understanding was certainly that it was included.
A major point of contention later on.
A huge one. Then, in 1916, you have the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This was a secret deal between Britain and France, basically carving up the Ottoman Middle East into spheres of influence. Initially, Palestine was designated for some kind of international administration because of all the holy sites.
Okay, so international control initially planned there, and then the Balfour Declaration.
Then comes 1917, the Balfour Declaration, a public statement from the British government via Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. It declared British support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people.
But it also included that crucial caveat.
Yes. Crucially, it added that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. And it came just before British forces under General Allenby captured Jerusalem.
Allenby famously walked into Jerusalem, presented as a liberator.
Indeed. It symbolized the shift in power, the end of Ottoman rule, but the future framework Britain was creating was riddled with these inherent tensions from day one, reconciling support for a Jewish national home with the rights and aspirations of the existing Arab majority, and potentially with earlier promises to Arabs. It was a circle that was almost impossible to square.
So how did Britain try to manage these clashing commitments during the war? Was there even a coherent plan?
Honestly, it seems largely driven by wartime expediency. Make the promises needed to gain allies, Arab revolt support, Jewish support internationally, and worry about sorting it out later. The Balfour Declaration, for instance, aimed partly at winning Jewish support for the Allied war effort, but also fit with certain strategic views in London about having a friendly entity near the Suez Canal.
A complex web indeed. So the war ends, the Ottoman Empire is gone, and we enter the era of the British Mandate. How did these great power dynamics play out now?
Well, the post-war settlement, formalized at the San Remo Conference in 1920, granted Britain the mandate for Palestine. And critically, the text of the Balfour Declaration was written directly into the mandate document.
So it became an official international obligation for Britain?
Exactly. Britain was now charged by the League of Nations with two seemingly incompatible goals: prepare Palestine for self-rule and facilitate the creation of a Jewish national home. The first High Commissioner, Sir Herbert Samuel, tried to maintain a degree of impartiality, but the core contradiction was baked in.
And meanwhile, Jewish immigration was increasing, especially with the rise of Nazism in Europe in the 30s. That must have heightened tensions dramatically.
It absolutely did. The 1920s and particularly the 1930s saw large waves of Jewish immigration. For the immigrants fleeing persecution, it was a return, a refuge. For the Palestinian Arab population, it looked increasingly like an invasion, a dispossession, a threat to their own national future.
Two totally different perspectives on the same reality.
Fundamentally different. And this fueled growing Arab resistance. You had riots and disturbances in 1920, 1921, 1929, escalating into the major Arab revolt of 1936 to 1939. Britain was caught in the middle, struggling to keep order, trying to reconcile the irreconcilable.
Did Britain try to find solutions? I know the Peel Commission proposed partition.
Yes. In 1937, the Peel Commission concluded the mandate was unworkable and recommended partitioning Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states, with Britain keeping control of Jerusalem and a corridor to the sea.
And the reaction?
The Zionist leadership, though unhappy with the proposed borders, accepted the principle of partition. The Arab leadership, however, rejected it completely. They wanted a unified, independent Arab Palestine.
So, partition failed, and then with World War II looming, British policy shifted again.
dramatically.
Yeah.
Facing the prospect of another world war, Britain needed stability in the Middle East and, frankly, needed Arab support, or at least neutrality. So in 1939, they issued a white paper.
The 1939 White Paper, what did it do?
It effectively abandoned partition and imposed severe restrictions on Jewish immigration and land purchases, aiming for an independent Palestine with an Arab majority within 10 years. For the Zionists, especially with the horrors unfolding in Europe, this felt like a staggering betrayal. Britain was prioritizing its imperial strategy over the Balfour Promise.
World War II then becomes another major turning point, changing the global power balance and the situation in Palestine itself.
Immensely so. The Holocaust obviously had a profound impact, creating huge international sympathy for Jewish suffering and strengthening the moral case for a Jewish state. Many survivors looked to Palestine as their only hope.
And the political dynamics shifted too.
Yes. During the war, the Jewish community in Palestine generally sided with Britain against the Axis. Some parts of the Palestinian Arab leadership, however, unfortunately tilted towards the Axis powers, hoping for a German victory to thwart Zionism. This further complicated things.
And the U.S. role.
Crucially, the United States emerged from the war as the dominant superpower, replacing a weakened Britain. President Truman became a strong advocate for allowing large numbers of Jewish displaced persons, Holocaust survivors, into Palestine, putting direct pressure on Britain and its restrictive white paper policy. Britain, exhausted and indebted after the war, found the mandate an unbearable burden.
Which leads us to the final phase, Britain deciding to get out.
By 1947, Britain had had enough. The mandate was costing lives. British soldiers were being killed in attacks by Jewish underground groups, like the bombing of the King David Hotel.
A major incident.
Yes. And it was costing a fortune. Britain announced it was terminating the mandate and handing the whole problem over to the newly formed United Nations.
So the UN steps in. What was their solution?
The UN formed a special committee, UNSCP. It recommended, again, partition, dividing Palestine into an Arab state, a Jewish state, and an international zone for Jerusalem.
And the reaction this time? Still divided.
Still divided. The Zionist movement accepted the UN partition plan, seeing it as the best chance for statehood, despite the proposed borders. The Arab states and the Palestinian Arab leadership rejected it outright.
But the plan went to a vote at the UN General Assembly.
It did, on November 29, 1947. And Resolution 181 passed, recommending partition. What's really striking is who voted for it. Both the United States and the Soviet Union supported partition.
That seems surprising, given the Cold War was starting.
It does, but their motives were different. The U.S. had humanitarian concerns, domestic political pressures, and saw it as a workable, if difficult, solution. The Soviets likely saw it as a way to get Britain out of the Middle East, weakening Western influence, perhaps hoping the new state of Israel might initially lean towards them. A classic great power calculation, really.
But the UN vote didn't bring peace. Quite the opposite.
Not at all. Immediately after the vote, civil war broke out between Jewish and Arab communities in Palestine. Jewish forces generally proved stronger and better organized. Britain just focused on withdrawing its troops.
And the withdrawal date was set.
Yes. The last British High Commissioner left on May 14, 1948. Britain basically washed its hands of the situation, leaving behind a legacy of unresolved conflict. On that very same day, David Ben-Gurion declared the independence of the State of Israel in Tel Aviv.
And the immediate reaction from the Arab world.
The very next day, armies from 5 neighboring Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, invaded the territory of the former mandate, aiming to prevent the establishment of Israel. This marked the beginning of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, and really a whole new chapter of conflict rooted deeply in that preceding era of great power politics.
So looking back across this whole period, from the Ottomans to 1948, it's clear that the story of Palestine wasn't just shaped by local actors, was it? The shifting interests, the strategies, the rivalries, the often contradictory promises of these external great powers were profoundly influential.
Absolutely central. You simply cannot understand how events unfolded, leading to the specific outcome in 1948, without appreciating the constant, complex, and often decisive role played by great power politics, British, French, Russian, German, Ottoman, and eventually American and Soviet interests. Their calculations dramatically shaped the landscape upon which local actors had to operate.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much do the legacies of those interventions, those decisions, made often for strategic reasons far removed from Palestine itself, still echo in the region today? It prompts a difficult question, perhaps. Does the pursuit of national interest by powerful states almost inevitably end up overshadowing the rights and aspirations of the people on the ground?
It's a crucial question to reflect on, and exploring the specific motivations behind key great power decisions during this time. Why exactly was the Balfour Declaration issued then? What were the precise calculations behind Soviet support for partition? Reveals just how intertwined global power dynamics and local destinies became.
Definitely food for thought. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.